Houston Cougars, a furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast, back here off. I think what can only be called a humbling Saturday game by your Houston Cougars against the number 11 Texas Tech Red Raiders. Won't sugarcoat it that it's the easiest Houston Cougar week overall, but I think one of those things that really makes me appreciate the highs, Bobby, is episodes like this one. And I want to ask you, as somebody who's been on the show a good long while now, you've hosted a lot of podcasts, so to call you new at this, I think would be inaccurate, but I would say someone who joined in the last few seasons of the show. Did you ever curse me because that you had to rewatch this game? That you wouldn't have normally done the rewatch that you did on this game were it not for co-hosting this podcast with me, one of your good friends and the co-host of the show.
You know, I didn't curse it because, you are watching Cougar sports, so it's hard to, even when they break our hearts, it's better than not watching Cougar sports. You just alluded to it. I did not watch this game live. I was actually about 5 miles from the stadium, if I had to guess, and I was not watching it live. I was at the Houston Dynamo game, kind of watching it on my phone for the first half, and needed to go. Yeah, and you are right. If your
former employer, by before anyone is just screaming at their device that, oh my God, this guy was in Houston, skipped out on this game for the 10th best Western Conference MLS team. Former employer, an occasion related to that. Why you were there?
Yes. I was there celebrating a friend who was retiring. I will just say that. So I was there more for the support of a friend and all of that. I wasn't just excited to go watch the Dynamo play and lose.
I was just picturing a Coug fans thread where I am already on very shaky ground over there in terms of the opinions I've expressed in the show, just being like, one of the hosts didn't even go to the game. He went to the Dynamo instead. These guys are sorry.
But to your point, pre me hosting this, I would not have watched this game back. So I wasn't cursing you, but I did kind of think, boy, there are better things I could do with my time than this right now. But I have a show I have to write down notes for. So it's tough to complain when you're in the position we are, though, bud.
Exactly, and there's value in talking about these games, and these kinds of games again make you really appreciate the highs, which there have been, I think, a good number of, both football and otherwise, in our times as Cougar fans and time doing this here podcast. So, going to mention at the top, as always, patreon.com/shpodcast, patreon.com/shpawdcast. Get access to our premium instant react shows and support the work that Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis. I think more than anything, just allowing us to continue doing this weekly show by supporting the work that we do there. So that is, one more time, if you don't do so already, and a humbling number if you do, patreon.com/shpodcast. Can't leave with anything but the football game we've spent a decent amount of time talking about already. For the first time this season, we are talking about the Houston Cougar football loss here on the Scott and Holm podcast. 35-11 to the then number 11, now national top 10, I believe number 9, Texas Tech Red Raiders. A comprehensive loss, it has to be said. There was no phase of this game where the visitors weren't the better team on Saturday night, and the better team by a pretty comfortable margin in most areas. I don't think we sugarcoated it when we previewed Tech last episode or tried to sell a false bill of goods about how beatable that football team was. They're a very good football team whose biggest strengths almost entirely line up with U of H's biggest weaknesses, or at least biggest question marks. And there was no bigger mismatch than along the line where U of H is shaky, prone to allowing pressure offensive line matched up with a Tech defensive line, where I'm probably not exaggerating in saying that this opponent's money people spent to make sure this was one of the very best defensive lines in college football, and that it was money well spent, clearly. Not hyperbole to say this game was lost entirely along that line because Tech constantly got pressure on whichever U of H quarterback was taking the snap, and certainly not letting the Cougars do anything in the run game besides the occasional Zion Crisp improvised scramble. In short, a pretty bad day at the office for the team wearing the blue jerseys on Saturday night at TDCU Stadium. Bobby, what are your overall thoughts on this one? And when you're ready for it, what was your overlooked play of this football game?
Yeah, man, just kind of some overall thoughts. You just got beat by a more talented team, right? Like, we can sit here and we can talk. What's the classic line? It's not all about X's and O's. It's about Jimmys and Joes. Sam, their Jimmys and Joes were a lot better than our Jimmys and Joes. And that's just how it is. And look, we can sit here and we can be as mad as we want to about college football now and how they paid for their roster. Yep, they sure did. And you know what? They did a really good job of building that roster. You and I have talked about this off podcast, just kind of texting as friends. I really like how they built their roster, right? They said, hey, we're not going to pay a lot of money for our quarterback, our wide receivers and running backs. We feel we can identify some really good talent there in the state of Texas that maybe isn't going to go to UT, A&M, something like that. And we can really build off that. There's a lot of talent in Texas, and we can get them to come to Lubbock. And then what we'll do is we'll spend our money on some lines. And I think that was pretty much what we saw. I don't think the goals for this U of H team aren't achievable anymore. I think you kind of said this. It feels like we as fans got a little bit over our skis, and I'm not saying that like a majority of our fans did or anything like that, but there's enough people who thought after the first 4 games that we were probably going to suddenly be this 9-win team, 10-win team. You start looking at things, you're like, all right, we can put up a really good fight against Texas Tech, and we can go. The goal heading into this season was 6-6. Like, I wanted to go to a bowl game. That's still very much in. It can still happen. In fact, I'd probably lean towards it will happen. And that's kind of what we wanted to see. And we're still seeing progress. The thing I wanted that was going to make me happy this year is if we were the team that other teams didn't want to play. Like, we were that team that was going to go to a bowl game that late in the season, you see them on your calendar, you see them on your schedule, and you go, fuck, right? You drop a loud F-bomb and you're going, oh, there's a chance. I want to make other schools nervous, right? You have that TCU game late in the season. You have that Baylor game late in the season. I'd argue Baylor may not be playing for much at that point, but TCU very much could be playing for a spot in Arlington in that Big 12 championship game, and they're not going to want to see these Houston Cougars. This defense is good enough to still strike fear in other teams. The offense can do enough to raise a little bit of hell. So I don't think that this loss, I think if you gave us truth serum before the season started, we all would have said, yeah, we're probably losing that game. I think the way you saw this game go down before the season started is U of H is better than we thought, and Texas Tech isn't as good as we think, and U of H could maybe beat them that way. Well, I got some bad news, Sam. U of H is what we thought U of H would be, and Tech is better than we thought they were going to be going into the season. So that leads you here. And overall, it's a disappointing loss, but sometimes you just get your teeth kicked in. Now, overlooked play, I'll kind of jump into it and you can give me your big thoughts, all that. How's that sound good? Yeah. Overlooked play on Tech's third drive. You got to stop on 3rd and 10. You actually stopped Morton about 4 yards short. The ball's in their kind of go for it range. So you actually take the holding penalty that was called there. You put him in a 3rd and 20. And the overlooked play here is that 3rd down. You have a chance to get him off the field, 3rd and 20. If you give up 10 here, it's 3rd and 10. They're probably not going for it. Instead, the Red Raiders make a 33-yard pass for the first down. They go down, they get the field goal. They get up 9 on you there, and you just kind of start to really feel the crowd get pulled out of it a little bit. You felt momentum just wasn't with U of H at that point, and it just felt like the result was starting to become inevitable. Not that you should be calling game on something at 3 drives in, but your offense hadn't done much at that point. Your defense was looking pretty good, but it was definitely a point where you were just kind of going, if we don't get this stop here, this could get ugly. And Sam, it got ugly, bud.
It unfortunately did. I think I got most of my big picture thoughts out of my system, but just other than I think co-signing what you said, that I believe any scenarios we cooked up in the preseason or even in the week prior to this game happening still revolved around in the preseason, Tech being disappointing and all the talent they've bought not really adding up to this top 10 team that can just mash your brains out like they do, or in the week prior to, okay, Tech is gonna talking back, I'm not sure, how I even got myself in this headspace, but they're gonna have just an uncharacteristically bad game, and somehow this offensive line that can't keep anybody out of the backfield is going to keep this defensive line that's looked very good through 4 games out of the backfield. It seems kind of silly talking about it, but again, that doesn't take away the fact that I'm still pretty bummed that the game played out the way it did, while still agreeing with you that none of your big picture goals, the way you feel about Houston Cougar football in 2025 should not be fundamentally different now than it was last Monday or Tuesday off of the Oregon State game. This team does have flaws. This game did put even a further magnifying glass on some flaws that I'm sure we're going to get to here, but I don't think anyone's fundamental outlook should be different about this team. I'm not going to have you guess it, but considering I've mentioned this specific play to you via text message a couple times since it happened, you probably won't be surprised it's my pick here. I went with the very first offensive play of the second half. If you'll recall, at this point, just set the scene briefly. The Cougs were down 25-11, got the kickoff coming out of halftime. You're still down a good amount at this point. 2 touchdowns is 2 touchdowns, but after how badly the first half went, an only 2 touchdown deficit at the time felt almost miraculous, and having a chance to cut the score to 1 touchdown, it felt a lot like a game that happened 2 years ago to the month when we played the Horns 2 seasons ago, their 1 year in the Big 12. You're hanging around and maybe putting pressure on an opponent who hasn't played a close game all season. And yes, I think anyone who watched the first half like I did, you're still doing a lot of cope to have talked yourself into that team based on how they played to truly get back in this game. But you were in a place that, quite frankly, you almost didn't feel like you deserved to be at that point. And factually, you score a touchdown here, and coming off end of the first half where Zion Chris actually did something that nobody's done this year on Texas Tech and scored a first half touchdown against them. Who knows, man? Maybe they don't cope with the moment well. Maybe they start to sweat. But unfortunately, the actual first play that happened was Zion Chris threw what I think was still a pretty nice looking ball downfield a little to Amari Thomas. It was just past the 40, and Thomas could not bring it in. Of course, if you complete the pass there, still a lot to do to even be in field goal range. But I do believe hitting on a pretty nice pass completion right out of the gates in the second half could have only been positive momentum for your offense coming off the one successful play you really had for most of the first half. I mean, all respect to Kobe Young's nice catch while being interfered beforehand, which got you into field goal range and getting on the board in the first place. But touchdown pass, unfortunately, your only of the game, probably the high point for your offense's confidence. And I believe you did get a first down after, I think it was a PI or a holding or something on Tech immediately after that incomplete pass I'm referring to here, but you just didn't look like a team that was confident they can move the ball. And maybe it's just vibes. Maybe I'm imagining things that aren't there, but I do believe if you completed a big pass to start the second half, got off to a good play there, I really do think that this could have been different. Though again, in both of our cases here, when you're talking about a game that was won by 24 points and 24 points probably flatters the Cougs, a little more challenging to say, hey, this one play had a really outsized impact in the game. But no, I think we would both agree, Tech just repeatedly beating U of H in every facet of this game. I think that had more to do with it, but these were, I think, big inflection points.
Yeah, not to jump in and interrupt you there. Felt a lot like last year where we were struggling to find plays in a lot more games in a lot negative light. I remember last year there were multiple games where you and I were texting going, what do you have for a play? Because I have no idea, because this game was 14-0 quickly.
And 14-0 and a 14-0 deficit with last year's offense just seemed like we were down like 50.
Yeah, exactly.
So per usual, we're going to give our offense and defense specific thoughts, but I wanted to start this a little bit different tonight. You knew this was coming, but still want your as unrehearsed, unresearched answer as you can think to this. Give me one thing you believe U of H or a U of H player did well or well enough to at least be called a slight positive coming out of this football game.
Yeah, I think the thing that I take away and think is a positive in this game was the secondary. I know there were some big busted plays, that 33-yarder, you had the 69-yarder for a touchdown. But overall, I felt like the secondary played with some aggression. They had the most juice of anybody on the field. I think you and I have discussed this, and you probably have it in your notes, so sorry that I'm taking this from you, is it was very low energy, it felt like, from this team, at least the offense, and that defensive secondary just really felt like they were there to play. McCutcheon had a great game. You saw him breaking up a lot of passes. They had a lot of tackles. I still feel, and again, I'll say this when we talk about the defense, the stats I don't think flatter this defense, but I think overall that the defense didn't look as bad as the stats say, and I think the secondary is certainly part of that.
Our answers came from the same place. I went a little more individual specific for mine. Zelmar Vetter made some notably good plays in the secondary on Saturday night. 3 pass breakups, and this wasn't a situation where, he had 3 pass breakups, but this was like well after Tech had decided this game. I mean, Tech won this pretty decisively, but I remember at least one of those breakups was to keep a Tech receiver from hauling in a touchdown. He came in as a highly rated transfer, Zelmar Vetter, and with the frame of, quite frankly, a guy who might play at a higher profile school than U of H, but this is a guy who never played above the Division I FCS level before the season. And against the best receivers that we've seen this year by a wide margin and might see all season, or at least regular season, Vetter raised his game, and he gave DC, Austin Armstrong, and the Cougar defensive staff something to think about. Not that Latrell McCutcheon or Will James haven't been good as your starting cornerbacks or your first choice cornerbacks this year, but it's nice to have in Vetter another really strong defensive player. And to something you and I actually talked about, unrelated, but maybe semi-related, before we recorded, another good portal find by this staff, who I think has shown now in his season some change, the ability to identify not insane. Like Vetter was a fairly heralded recruit, transfer portal wise, but like not a no-brainer 4-star, every big program's into him. Like the Cougars found a guy, and the Cougars have found lots of guys, or at least the Willie Fritz staff has recently. And I had to think about my answer a bit on this one. Once I did, I was actually surprised how enthused I was about Zelmar Vetter's performance, because I didn't think anything about this football game could enthuse me in any way. Now Vetter leads the team by a wide margin with 6 pass breakups in the season to date, so that'll be fun to watch. Bobby, there's not any happy direction to look in, metaphorically, if you're a U of H fan looking back in this game, though I do agree with you. I think the defensive performance, I think there are positives to be found there, even if in a lot of ways it still was probably your worst performance of the season. But figured we'd rip off the Band-Aid and talk about an offensive effort where all of the pain points we expected in the pregame showed up on the field Saturday night. I am starving for a day when a U of H offensive line doesn't just get its butt kicked to the point of attack anytime they face a good or better than good, in this case, defensive line. And that's kind of unfair, because Tech's defensive line is going to be extremely challenging for just about anyone who's on their schedule this year. David Bailey, Tech star pass rusher, basically lived in the Cougar backfield all game, and he wasn't the only red rare defensive player to get pressure, but he did it more often than anyone else on Saturday night. 3 TFLs, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and it felt like countless times creating pressure. I know this because you mentioned it at a later point. I was going to ask if you saw that stat where U of H allowed pressure on just over 65% of their dropbacks on Saturday night, but that's a pretty insane stat, isn't it?
Yeah, man, that's insane.
And the pregame matchups, again, did give us some kind of indication this would happen. This Cougar offensive line was allowing one of the highest pressure rates in the entire country before facing this Tech defensive line. And so it went about as bad as you'd expect the on-paper mismatch there to go. It reminded me of when we see Cougar men's basketball face a team that's bad at rebounding the pregame. And you see that in our position, you think to yourself, oh, buddy, this team's about to eat this game. And it ends up being one of those situations where the Cougs have like 16 offensive boards to their 4, and we win the game by like 25 points or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's how this feels. That is how this feels, huh? Like that is
You-
the
I
lived
didn't even
reality
think
of
about it
Big
that
12
way,
and
but
AAC opponents. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it that way, but you're absolutely right. That's one of those where you're kind of like, I don't want to, like, you almost don't want to say anything about it when you're like previewing the game because you're like, they're not good at this and I hope they don't notice. And then, yeah, you look up and you're up 40 and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
And acknowledging that there probably is no silver bullet strategy that could have coped with the level of mismatch that we've both now talked about when the Cougar offensive line was facing the Tech defensive line. I was a little disappointed at the lack of creativity. It looked like our general game plan that we would see against most every other opponent this year. And that game plan's fine enough when you're not facing a defensive line that's one of the best in the entire country. And I guess my question would be, to Slade Nagel and the U of H offensive brain trust, did you really expect any of that to work? I'm not trying to be too harsh here because I don't believe there is truly a plan that could solve for a Tech's defensive line when you have what U of H has on its offensive front. So it's not a really serious critique because I don't have a good alternative, but it also kind of felt like a game plan that was pre-surrendering to the fact that there's no way we could realistically beat this opponent. Bobby, I think I've talked long enough here. What are your offensive takeaways from a tough night at the office for the Cougs?
Yeah, man, you kind of said it. It really felt like a classic "Hello, darkness, my old friend," right? Where you're just kind of sitting there and you see the offensive line just getting beat. You don't win football games if you don't win up front. And man, kind of watching it, I gotta tip my hat to the Texas Tech linebackers as well. Like the O line wasn't getting to the next level, but the Texas Tech linebacking core was flying to the ball, man. It's just a good old fashioned ass beating, Sam. That's just what this was. Just a good old fashioned ass beating. I don't think really anyone on the offense did anything that looked good or made me go, ooh, wow, that was amazing. They just, yeah, Zeon Chris had the nice pass. Didn't watch much film on Zeon Chris, I would imagine. Like that always happens with backups. You kind of come in, you get that pop, the momentum a little bit. So, but you know, I'll defend Dean Connors a little bit here. Him and the other backs just had zero space to run. I think I sent you a picture earlier of Dean Connors taking a handoff, and there are 3 linebackers that don't have anybody on them. Just there's not a soul on those linebackers. He's still 4 yards deep in the backfield. There's nobody touching a linebacker, and the offensive line's probably a yard behind the line of scrimmage, a yard or two behind the line of scrimmage. I don't know if you know this, Sam. You're not going to get many yards on the ground if your offensive line is getting beat off the ball that badly and the linebackers aren't getting touched by anybody.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of look at the PFF pressures on the quarterback, pressured more than anyone else in the country this past week by like a good 10-20%. It was just, you look at the play that Wigman gets injured on, where he gets taken out with the concussion-like symptoms or whatever we're calling it. I watched it and I paused it at the top of his drop back. Sam, 2 guys had already beat their guys by the time he was at the top of his drop back, and there was nobody open. Like they had the Skycam view of it, and there was just nobody open. Nobody's open, and he is about to get popped. The fact he got that pass off and it was in Koziol's kind of range-ish was a minor miracle.
It was rough. I think the fact that this offense was not able to get Tanner Koziol involved is another one of those things that should have told us that this was going to be a long night if you're a Cougar fan. Not that he's the only difference maker in the passing game on this team. We've also seen Amari Thomas and Stephon Johnson Jr. have their difference maker moments. And big picture, I think that right there is a reason to still be excited about the 2025 Cougar football team. That is 3 more difference makers in the passing game than we had pretty much all of last season. But if you had told me nothing else before kickoff, but the fact that Tanner Koziol would only have 2 receptions for 10 yards in this one, I at least would have had some expectation this was going to be a very rough offensive night. I want to give Kobe Young his flowers. His first career reception was a really nice one, 43-yarder where he was being blatantly interfered with, but you got the call on that one. Your first college reception is always going to be a memorable occasion, but I think a very, very, very memorable way for the redshirt freshman to open his account in the college game. And I don't want to go overboard with how Zeon Chris did in this game, I'll just say he did decently considering he was asked to come in midway through and cold for the injured starter. The challenge of, from the word go, running for his life almost every time he had to drop back to pass. The touchdown pass in the early third quarter drop that I had earlier as my overlook play were better throws than we saw from Zion last year generally. I would go so far as to say almost the touchdown pass might have been the best throw he's made as a Cougar quarterback. Because I know he had one that was for like a ton of air yards or something like that when he was at Ooh La La the one year he started there. So he looked a little bit better in flashes than we saw last year. And you also take into account that this opponent was certainly not going to be the one where Zion Chris gets things figured out. This is going to be hell for whoever was back there as the Cougar quarterback, no matter who it was on Saturday night. I mean, I want Connor Wigman to be out there this coming Saturday if he clears everything he needs to clear in concussion protocol. But I would say I am 10% less worried about the idea of starting Zion this week if Wigman is still a big question mark. That doesn't mean I'm not worried about that prospect, but against an opponent like Oklahoma State defense that obviously is not in the same galaxy as Tex, I think we could do some stuff with Zion at quarterback. Very, very qualified praise, I realize, but I think he flashed some nice things. I don't think you should go overboard about it, but I think he flashed some nice stuff against the Red Rares and about the most adverse circumstances you could ask a quarterback to be in. Bobby, do you have any other offensive thoughts from this one?
God, no, man. I want to forget about this offensive performance as quickly as possible, my guy.
No doubt. In the days since this game happened, I feel, and I didn't feel great after the game went final, but I felt slightly worse about the offensive performance. It really sunk into me how bad it was, and slightly better about the defensive performance as compared to when I sat down and did the Patreon Instant React pod right after this game went final. Wasn't a great defensive performance by any stretch of the imagination. Even calling it good might be somewhat of a stretch. I mean, the Tech still had just over 6 yards per play. It's not great. But, and even acknowledging the Cougar offense left this defense out to dry, and boy, did they leave them out to dry. I still have a high enough standard for what I think this year's defense can be that I don't believe good describes this one. But unlike the offense, where your positives were virtually non-existent, it was basically 1 to 2 good plays and extremely qualified praise of Zion Chris. I don't think you have to squint as hard here to see the positives for the Cougar defense. But you didn't win at the point of attack, and we knew coming in, Tech spent heavily on that offensive line as well. And I still don't think you lost that matchup even close to as badly as the U of H offensive line did with their matchup with the Tech defensive front. Saying the Cougs got anything like sustained pressure wouldn't be accurate, but getting to Baron Morton twice isn't nothing. That had only happened 3 times in the 4 games prior to this one, including one against a Utah team that is regularly very good at doing that. And those weren't the only times U of H got pressure, though. I wouldn't say U of H got consistent enough to say it's a positive about the performance. In the most general terms, I would say this was a decent, bordering on good performance, considering this is probably the best offense we'll see all season, although I'm not as confident in that as I am about Tech's defense being the best we'll see. But I think worst case, one of the best 2 or 3 offenses you'll see all season, and the fact that your defense had to be on the field for almost 38 of the 60 minutes on Saturday. You don't have to overhype this performance. There were things the Cougar defense didn't do well, but no defense out there against this caliber opponent and having to be on the field for as ludicrously long as this defense was is going to turn in an A+ performance. How are you feeling about the defense on Saturday, Bobby?
Yeah, I said this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the positives. Somehow, despite the stats and really the results, this didn't feel like a bad defensive performance. I thought it was fine. You played arguably the best offense you're going to play all year. Maybe Arizona State has something to say, but I would definitely put Texas Tech's offense up there more than Arizona State's. I thought generally, like I said, the secondary did well. You got a couple of sacks. You got to Morton twice, like you said. You got some pressure on him, which bodes well for future games. I think Texas Tech probably has one of the better offensive lines that we saw. And one thing we've seen a lot with this defense is their ability to get to the quarterback and cause disruption. It didn't happen quite as much in this game as you might want it to, but I don't think that it was a performance that made you question if this defensive line is still going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. The defense has a real bend don't break kind of attitude this year. I don't know if they talked a lot about it on the coverage of the game, but it's kind of been something that's been happening a lot all season. You saw it a lot with Rice. You saw it a lot with SFA even. The problem is your offense has to go down and score occasionally, because the defense is on the field for a long time. They're taking a lot of plays. When you just kind of look at it, they are playing a lot of plays. And when you are bend don't break, you can expect a 10-play drive that ends up with a field goal. That's still 10 plays. That's a 4-minute drive that takes a lot out of your defense. You really need your offense to get out there and stay out there for some sustained kind of time, and you just haven't really seen that yet. The 25 at halftime doesn't look good, but it really felt like that could have been worse if you don't play that bend don't break defense. I think the defense got a couple of stops that they really needed and kept this game kind of in check, even if it didn't look like it at halftime.
The tackling wasn't as crisp in this one as most of your previous games, but you can't divorce that from the fact that almost 2/3 of the game, this team wasn't on the field. Like it's simply not realistic to expect the guys to play almost 40 minutes and still be tackling like your offense is actually doing a decent job, possessing the ball, actually giving your defense a break, something your offense just emphatically didn't do. If the tackling is yeah, exactly. If the tackling is a struggle this week at Oklahoma State, sure, check back with me, and I will almost certainly feel somewhat, if not very different. Tech did what they needed to do in the run game. I still don't think the just over 200 yards allowed looks that bad to me when you consider they ran the ball 50 times on Saturday night, and you can't say enough good things about how the Cougs defense did in the red zone. Tech finished 6 different drives inside the U of H 30-yard line, which I know that's not the red zone, but bear with me. 6 different drives inside the 30-yard line where they had to settle for a field goal or a field goal attempt. To me, that's the most illuminating positive stat when it comes to this defense, and a reminder of how much worse this game could have been if you hadn't gotten a solid performance from your defense on a night where the offense did almost nothing. That's not me hand waving away anything that went wrong on defense or saying this was a perfect effort, but there are plenty of U of H defenses we've watched over the years that would have gotten a comically high score dropped on them in this one. I mean, I drove up to Lubbock for the privilege, Bobby, of watching the 2018 Texas Tech offense score 63 on us and set a Texas Tech passing record against that year's Cougar defense. Yeah, Texas Tech passes for lots of yards, has done it historically, like the last 30 or so years. If you're setting a passing record, you've thrown for a just ludicrous amount of yards, which I drove 16 hours combined in a weekend for the privilege of watching. It's like, I guess I can thank my situation now that I didn't have to spend almost a full day in a car for the privilege of witnessing Tech beating us by multiple touchdowns this time. I just did it from my living room, though. Even though I do wish I was there with all of y'all at the stadium, not the round of Tech fans, but you Cougar fans. I wish I was there experiencing it. I wish I was in a place where I could drive and experience it in person, even the weekends where it's like this one and it doesn't go so hot. Bobby, any other Cougar defense or general Tech game thoughts that we haven't found time for?
Checking my notes here. No.
I have one final thought, if you'll allow me. I think you'll know where I'm going with this. You know me well. Would you say I'm generally the kind of fan, or I guess fan podcaster in this case, who tries to stick with what he can quantify and doesn't make a ton of broad sweeping statements that the data doesn't back up or that kind of thing?
I would say that.
The logical part of my brain keeps telling me, and this is what I believe, that you knew without a shadow of doubt that this was one of, if not the best teams on the schedule. This wasn't ever a game that I counted as a hypothetical win before the current season, and this opponent ended up being 100% good for the preseason hype. And I ask myself, why, and I'm not really that annoyed about it right now, but this is more like the day after, why are you still annoyed about this? I want so badly to be able to completely flush this game in that way, and I'll probably get there by the end of this week. It's not like I wake up in a cold sweat in the morning thinking about this game. I've mostly slept normally here over the past several days, and this is such an illogical fan take for me. I wanted this team to fucking compete, Bobby. I wanted this team to look fired up, to be mad as hell that you're a big underdog in your home stadium and that this team and their fans, this opponent and their fans, all week could not be more clear that they didn't think you were shit. They expected you to roll over and not really compete in this game, and that this Saturday was going to be a coronation on ESPN of a soon-to-be top 10 Texas Tech football program that U of H was barely going to do anything about. That's what their fans said all week. That's kind of what, if you read between the lines, what was coming out of their football building and their AD as well. And it happened. And 2 years ago, and this is no way an endorsement of the 2023 U of H football team or that head coach or that staff, really. That season was one of the more hapless seasons of Cougar football I've lived through. I would take Willie Fritz, this staff, everything about this team 100 times over 100 over Cougar football from 2 years ago, other than maybe Matthew Golden. I wouldn't mind having Matthew Golden on this team. I think he'd be a difference maker. But in all seriousness, that team against an even higher ranked Longhorn team that ended up playing in the college football playoff after their own very slow start in that one, the Cougs actually went out in that game and competed with the Horns. That actually looked like a team that believed they could win that football game, and actually a team that looked like they were mad about how this highly favored visitor was treating them. And if you don't like what I'm saying here, and you can call me a bad Cougar, whatever you want to call me, but to me, our guys didn't generally look like they believed they could win this football game, and that's the bitterest pill to swallow. Of course, this doesn't mean that plenty of actually, what you said earlier, I believe all of the realistic preseason goals for this football team are still there. Quarterback health, of course, is going to always loom large, but this team still has a lot of good things going for it, and no team left on the schedule is going to challenge you in the same ways that Texas Tech challenged you. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here as any kind of larger big picture negativity about Houston Cougar football, but I was hoping our guys would play up to the moment, and I'm sorry, in the most basic sense, they didn't. And it was my own naivete to think that vibes or guys being pumped for a big game would bridge the talent gap at the key positions, but that's just my last free-floating thought about this game. No need to lose faith over one game that we all knew was going to be challenging to win. But I'd hoped after all the talking that Tech fans did that, I don't know, we had a crazy upset or something coming, Bobby, and that unfortunately couldn't have been further from what actually happened.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think the defense came out a little fired up. It's just the offense just came out really tepid and just kind of didn't look like they knew what they were doing out there.
Let me try. That offense didn't. That the defense looked pretty fired up. I would co-sign that. That offense, to me, you could tell from the first play. These guys aren't ready for this game.
Yeah. I do want to add one more thing that neither one of us mentioned. That kick-catch interference call is the worst call that I've seen, quite possibly in all of college football this year.
It didn't matter the outcome, but awful call.
Yeah. I'm not saying that U of H wins this game if that goes differently. I think the game's a lot closer if that goes differently. Cougs punt, they get the ball, you get some momentum, crowd gets into it a little bit more. I don't think you're winning, but I don't think you're down. You think
we're mounting a drive, even a short-ish field drive on Texas Tech's defense?
No, but even there, you're in field goal range at that point. Like it gets
3 more points.
It gets 6-3. You never know what could happen from there. I said leading into the week that how I thought this U of H team was going to win this game was you score, you stop, you get a score, you punch them in the mouth before they know what hit them. And that was an opportunity to do that. And it was taken away from you by just one of the absolute worst calls that you could see. I said that if the Cougs were going to win, you go down, you get a touchdown on your first drive, stop them 3 and out. Maybe they pick up a first down. You go down, you score again. It's 14-0. They don't know what hit them. If it's 3-3 or 6-3 at that point, the crowd's into it. I'm not saying the Cougs win. I definitely don't think the Cougs lose by as much as they do. I think you go into halftime with a little bit more belief than what you ended up doing.
I think we can disagree on that. I don't disagree with you even an iota that is the worst call I've seen. Like there have been bad calls in other games, but there have been probably bad calls that benefit the Cougars that I'm not giving as much mental space to. There's nothing remotely on the level. This is a suspension worthy call. Like if the Big 12 is going to suspend a crew for messing up which specific kick you're doing from Missouri, Kansas, which to me, I don't know. Like, yes, that's that's bad. Like, I don't think it's suspension of the crew worthy. If you entirely hallucinate a call, like,
Yeah,
that's the
and
thing. Like, he wasn't taught. Like, was he touched? Like, was the returner touched?
I don't think so.
So it's like, where was the like? How was anyone close enough to interfere? And then like the announcers, I mean, the announcers moved on because you can't just sit there as the ESPN crew and just talk about a bad call. Like, you have to talk about the action. But they talked about it a while, and they were just completely perplexed and never came back to, oh, I almost feel like they should have like brought in whoever their Dean Blandino is. I don't remember any of the names outside of him and Mike Pereira, but like, I don't know, bring on the rules expert. Like, it was usually you could at least see like, oh, okay, like he called holding there, but like it looks like it was a good block, but again, like his arm did something. This one was entirely hallucinated. It was a terrible call. I don't agree that it had any impact on this game really because
I'm not
of
saying
how
that
decisive this was, but
I'm not saying that I absolutely think that the Cougs would have won.
I just don't think we've gotten a first down. Like, I don't think we were ever even good for a guaranteed first down against this defense. We did it sometimes, but it felt like very much out of character for our offense in this game when that happened. That's the only reason, just because we were so unable to do anything defensively or offensively against Texas Tech's defense that it's hard to say even a catastrophically bad call like that one really swung this game, because when were we ever going to score points on this Tech defense?
Yeah, like I said, I understand what you're saying here. All I'm saying is how you have to win this game is through momentum, and you have to get lucky, and you have to have how you are going to beat a Texas Tech team is they muff a punt and they give you points on the board. And again, you're not wrong in saying that we're not able to move the ball. But if you go down, you score after that muff punt, and then somehow you get another 3 and out, or even you hold them again, you get the ball back. If you can go down and score again, not saying I necessarily think we were going to do it, that's a different ball game. I'm not saying that is the reason why we lost or anything like that. I don't know what would happen. I think we still lose, but I think you go into halftime feeling a little bit better if you're able to get the points there.
So we've got to flush this game and move on, because there's a critically important game this coming week. Cougs can't let any of the bad stuff that happened last Saturday bleed into this one. And before we get into our thoughts on this week's opponent, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, for the second week in a row, we brought on a repeat guest to the pod, in this case, certainly a very good friend of the show, to get to know a bit more about our second orange-colored opponent with OSU initials. So here that is.
All right, well, joining us tonight to help all of us learn a little bit more about the OSU Cowboys, Oklahoma State Cowboys, is friend of the show, network impresario of the show, Phillip Slavin, OSU fan and alum, Big 12 podcaster on the network. What do we call it? The home show, 1012 podcast, founder of the 1012 Network. I think I got everything there. Phillip, thanks for joining the pod. How are you?
Doing well. You forgot father of 3, girl dad. I think that rounds it up.
Okay, perfect. All right, as long as somebody got it in there, we will go ahead and move on. So we're going
minor league baseball hat aficionado. There we go.
Got it. Yeah. I have my El Paso Chihuahuas hat. I used to, when I was a kid, we'd go to El Paso Diablos games with my grandparents, and they folded and became the Chihuahuas. Fun little El Paso baseball fact there. All right. So we're going to mainly focus on Oklahoma State football, of course, but while we have you here, we had to talk about someone who won't be at this game. A long time now former head coach, Oklahoma State head coach Mike Gundy. In a situation like this, you can never chalk it up to one thing, but what is the biggest reason why Gundy's time ended the way that it did?
One of my favorite movie quotes has been one that I've been able to apply to the situation with Gundy for a few years now. And that is, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Gundy is known for his massive personality. And when things are good, it's awesome. When things are not, name me the head coach who's been at any school for as long as Gundy has, who got while the getting was good. Outside of Saban, I can't. Can't think of one. And so this was not like, oh, they only had a bad year last year and now they just had like 3 bad games. Why after all that he's done? You're not paid for what you've done. You're paid for what you are supposed to be doing or doing moving forward. The cracks have been there in this foundation since 2020. Off the field issues with the players. It was saved by Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator, helping lead them in 2021 to an almost Big 12 title and a win over Notre Dame. It was Gundy being too stubborn to not just keep his buddies around, his golfing buddies. It's Mike Gundy not really wanting to adapt to NIL or paying players, which leads to boosters not wanting to trust Gundy with the funds that are needed. It is, hey, they've spent this offseason on the roster. And a lot of those guys they brought in haven't done much. There's a lot of cracks in this program, and they finally came to a head last year. It to what now really feel like outlier successful seasons, 2021, and then a 5-game win streak in 2023, where you came up with a new offense. It took people a few weeks to figure it out. Kind of kept him afloat because 22 was bad. 2020 it was COVID, so you can't put the blame on him. And then you get last year, well, it brought everybody back, and it was, but you still ran the exact same thing that everyone had figured out at the end of last year, and you had no second punch because your offensive coordinator was not a good offensive coordinator, but as your buddy and your longtime wide receiver coach, you didn't want to let him go. It's not one thing. It's not just the losses. He has rubbed so many people the wrong way that if the ground completely fell out, if the earth opened up and swallowed the program whole, that was going to let him go. And after last year, look, he did the move every head coach does, right? You fire everybody. Only one left is you and your strength and conditioning coach, Rob Glass, built by Glass, and some analysts, things like that. And you start this year, and you get the worst loss in 50-something years to Oregon. You lose to Tulsa for the first time in 20-something, in like 30-something years. It's the first loss at home since like World War II. Like, you were setting unprecedented negative records to start this year. I was shocked they pulled the trigger when they did. You can mixed messaging about what actually happened. I believe the messaging that they approached him and offered him the opportunity to retire, and he gave his press conference Monday after that loss to Tulsa and was very adamantly like, I'm going nowhere. And it was, fire me and pay me my money. And that's what they did. And so Mike Gundy is no longer the head coach of Oklahoma State. And it was the right call.
We're going to do one more on Gundy. As somebody who has followed that program for his entire tenure in Stillwater, what are the biggest things you believe got missed or not properly understood about Gundy's tenure at OSU?
That's a good question. I feel like at this point, he's been around so long, everyone has a pretty good idea of who he is. And those who don't aren't going to. Does that make sense? Like, I get that. He is who he says he is.
The Bears are who we thought they were.
Right. Like they told you the plan. Just because you didn't listen to the plan doesn't mean that's. Well, this guy over here told me that's not what was actually happening. No, the guy told you what it was. Mike Gundy was who he was. And it worked when he was winning. And it worked when there was no player equality, right? When players didn't have power, because it was built on being a developmental program. Anytime they tried to push towards being, let's try and go get stars and studs and stuff, 5 stars, it didn't work. And they'd go back to being developmental. But over time, like all head coaches, you start to be more conservative. You start to get stuck in your ways. You start to think you know it all. Change has come. And by golly, gosh darn it, I'm going to prove them wrong. I I don't have to go do that. I don't have to spend money. I don't have to treat players, like they're people and not players. Like I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but like he's a coach from of what is now a bygone era. And unfortunately for him, change came like a bullet. And it tore up what he did. There's no discounting how much that man knows about football. But that doesn't mean you can operate in this day and age. It's not, you can't be successful as the same kind of coach. That doesn't mean that you can't go from the old era to the new era and not still be successful. It just means you have to be adaptable. The greatest gift Nick Saban had was his adaptability and willingness to change, to adjust when something, this didn't work anymore. Guess we're going to go do this now. And Gundy was more willing to do that when forced to earlier in the day. And he had so much power now, no one was going to tell him to do anything. And so, like I said, you either die a hero, live long enough, save yourself, become the villain. And in this case, he was the villain because he didn't want to change and he didn't want to have to do things the way they had to be done and just thought that it should work.
You probably, since you are such our Big 12 guy, saw that we didn't have the best game against Texas Tech this past week. And on this week's pod, we challenged ourselves to find something we feel positively about from that U of H Tech game. As you can imagine, it's kind of been its own challenge. Considering the difficulties of the Oklahoma State season, what is one thing, and look, it can be anything here, that you feel positively about from 2025 Cowboy football?
It's that at the moment, it's one of the better jobs available.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. This is a lost season for OSU football. It is. I laugh at fans on social media, and I love OSU fans, but I laugh at the ones who are like getting so emotionally bent out of shape about how poor the games are going. I'm like, guys, if how you feel is being impacted by a team with an interim head coach, an interim defensive coordinator, players in the portal, now on a third or fourth string quarterback. Like, y'all, this season is just like, just roll with it. Just blow up the inner tube, put it in the lazy river, and just float. Okay, that's what this is. Be supportive of the team, be supportive of the players, but sitting here and complaining about the caliber of the offensive play calling or like the defensive scheme, like, y'all, this season is a wash. Nothing that happens this year for the rest of the way has any impact on what this program will or won't be moving forward. You're going to have an entire overhaul. Are there a few coaches who might or members of the staff who might be back next year with the new guy? Yeah, I could very much see Rob Glass being back. I mean, he's the highest paid strength and conditioning coach in the country for a reason. There are some alum on the roster who have been very, very impactful to bringing in some really talented players and helping guys develop. Maybe some of them will stick around. But this idea that like this season means anything at this point, like it means something to the players who are going out there and playing and want to have a good year. To the seniors, I hate that this is what they're having to deal with. The players who transferred in for their last year of college football, and this is what they're going to do. Like, I hope they get a win just so they can have, break the streak before next year. But like, this season is what it is. And so the positives are like, I am the least emotionally invested in a negative way in this team that I think I've ever been, which has been great for my like family life at home.
Yeah.
And
right.
also that this is a good job. And there are some misconceptions about where this job ranks in my mind. I disagree on anyone who has Arkansas above Oklahoma State, just based off of, I don't care how much money Arkansas has. They spend a ton on baseball and basketball. Like, they're never going to spend the most on football. You're going to be in the SEC. Good luck with that. Whereas Oklahoma State, Texas Tech is spending like an SEC school. Oklahoma State's got more money than people realize and will spend more money because there's boosters who have been holding back, waiting for Gundy to be gone. And so the next hire could influence a lot of money coming in. And you can get coaches that understand and get what college football is nowadays. So like, there is at this point, to me, nothing but optimism about this program.
All right, well, we've had a little bit of optimism in the previous question, but let's talk a little bit about Saturday. What is the one thing that you have the least faith that the Cowboys are going to do well in Saturday's game?
Win.
Fair enough.
Honestly, look, this team's just not very good. Like it's just not very talented. And I don't mean, I hate saying these kind of things. It sounds bad. But like you're on you had your, what do they call it? The dead cat bounce when you play Baylor, and had some offense and did some trick plays and had some fun. And then last week you were on the road. Now you're home again. They're going to I think there'll be a decent crowd. It's not going to be what it normally is, but I think there'll be a decent crowd because they're going to be there to support the team. People like Meacham, who's interim head coach for, OC, former Oklahoma State wide receiver coach, former Oklahoma State player. There's players that we like on this roster, and some that will probably still be here next season for whoever the next head coach is. And so, like, there will be some high points. I think they're going to, bad teams always play way better at home than on the road. Just fade OSU on the road all year. So, like, for this week game, like, I think the offense is going to struggle because I really like Houston's defense a lot. So I'm really curious, like, what does the offense even look like? Haas Haney's not coming back in. I don't know if he's going to come back at all this season after his injury. Zane Flores is not playing this weekend, and that feels very much less about this weekend and more about, like, Zane Flores is not going to be playing at Oklahoma State anymore. And so you're on, like, former walk-ons and stuff because all the other quarterbacks left in the offseason. So I don't know. Are we going to come out there and run triple option? Are we going to just try and run the ball? Are we going to have some I don't even know what the offense, who's going to start at quarterback. Like, I don't even, like, I'm sure there's information out there and I just haven't done a good job of looking it up. I'm sorry. I have a full-time job. And again, I'm not as emotionally invested in this season because let's go with Banks Bowen, who's a freshman. You've got more defensive players entering the portal. Being honest, like, this is going to be the game on everyone's schedule that they're like, okay, just don't screw up and we're going to win. Like, just don't screw up and we're going to win.
Yeah,
but that is like, I don't know how Kansas fans did this for a decade plus.
I didn't expect Kansas to start catching strays in this interview, but
always.
Here we are. No. So we always ask our guests, who is the player or players that Sam and I are likely overlooking in our efforts to properly preview this Oklahoma State team?
I would say Wendell Gregory has been phenomenal for Oklahoma State on the defensive side. And from all I can tell, he's not leaving. He's enjoying his time here. He's going to keep playing. He's been the most disruptive player on the defense for Oklahoma State. If there is a big positive on the defense, it has been him. And I think he'll just continue to be phenomenal. Anytime he can go up against an offensive line that is not great, if that makes sense.
Shaky.
I mean, yeah, definitely. If it's an inferior offensive line, he's going to have a nice day. He's going to put up stats. He had, I think it was 4 sacks against the FCS opener on his own. So on the defensive side, like, he's one to watch. I think he's going to continue to impress. On the offensive side, the problem is I like the running backs. I would love to say Terrell Davis. Guy was the leading receiver in all of college football last year at D2 UCO. He comes into Oklahoma State, and when he's had the opportunities to make plays, he's made some really impressive and fun to watch plays. But as a receiver, you are only as good as your quarterback who gets you the ball. And so I'd love to say Terrell Davis. I just don't know how many opportunities he's actually going to have to make a big play. Now, if in the opportunities he's given, he'll have one. There's going to be some catch you're like, gosh darn it. Like, That should have been incomplete. How did he do that? Like, he's going to have a play like that. I would put money. If there's a player prop that says Terrell Davis to make one, wow, how do you do that play? Plus 200. I will put some money down on that player prop. Aside from that, like, I like Rodney Fields. I like Trent Howland. The offensive line it's all right. If the tight ends are still not healthy, that's going to be a problem. But so I would say if there's players to watch, it's Terrell Davis on the offense, wide receiver, and Wendell Gregory on the defensive line, defensive end. I think he'll have a nice day.
Now that we do have the Big 12 like media czar here, that's what I'm going to call you. Let's talk a little bit about the 2025 Big 12 season. Couple of questions there. What's the biggest thing you've been surprised by from the season so far?
Cincinnati.
Fair enough.
And look, because I came into the season saying I love the talent on the roster. And some people didn't, and I said, no, I think this is a really talented roster. Props to the coaching staff for putting this roster together. I mean, you look, they had the best offensive line in the Big 12. It's phenomenal. They've given up one sack all season, and it is a huge reason why Brendan Sorsby has looked as good as he has this year, and has continued to get better and better because he's been able to trust his offensive line more and more, and the coaching staff has been able to trust the offensive line more and more as the season has progressed. So it's why the only interception Brendan Sorsby's thrown so far was that one that ended the Nebraska game that lost them the game, which is still to me on the coaching staff. I was very low on this coaching staff. I don't know if they're just you give listen. I had Justin Williams of The Athletic on Monday's big show, and look, you have to give full credit. He's right. Give full credit to the coaching staff. They put this roster together. This roster is entirely Scott Satterfield's roster. This is not it's still a bunch of guys from Luke. This is Scott Satterfield's roster, and it's a very, very good roster. They did a great job bringing in players out of the portal. They've done a great job with development. This could be this year's Arizona State, the team that really not really going to talk about them, maybe, and then kind of comes out of nowhere, because the Iowa State win. Yeah, it was not so much a fluke, if that makes sense. Yeah, it was crazy how much they were up by early, but I don't think it's a fluke. And as long as Brendan Sorsby is able to continue to play in a clean pocket and be able to trust that offensive line is going to keep me safe and keep me protected, and the rushing attacks be able to be as good as it is because the offensive line is so good, as long as that offensive line stays healthy for Cincinnati, they're going to win a lot of games and have a very successful season. Like, Texas Tech is going to be in Arlington. I'll just say it. People wanted to argue, will they still have to do? I don't know. They got to go to Arizona State. Texas Tech is going to be in Arlington. The question is, who are they going to face? I have said for all offseason, I do not believe we're going to get a rematch. I think in a 16-team conference with crazy tiebreakers and all this, and the depth of talent the Big 12 has, and how even a lot of things are, and how much comes down to one-score games and things like that, I don't think we're going to get a rematch. I think it's going to be too hard in this conference to have one. Cincinnati doesn't play Texas Tech this year in the regular season. I think that's going to be a big deal. I think if you can, whoever the best team in the conference is, if you can if your schedule avoids them, you have a good shot to get there to Arlington to face that team. I think Cincinnati has a schedule that sets up. It's not that it's an easy schedule. They're going to have some tough games still, but I think the schedule sets up well for them, especially now that they have that win over Iowa State.
My next question was going to be, who will be the two teams playing in Arlington, and why did you pick those two specifically? We have Tech. Are you ready to lay it down that you think it's going to be Cincy, or do you think someone else is going to come out and be in Arlington?
Okay. I think this is about a 4-team race behind Texas. I think it's Texas Tech in the field. I think it's about a 4-team race.
Yes. Between
Cincinnati, Arizona State, Iowa State, and Utah. No, I don't think BYU is in this race. I think they are 5-0 because they've benefited from a very favorable schedule that's about to get a whole heck of a lot harder over the next month. Utah's in a bad spot because they've already lost to Texas Tech. But if Texas Tech's the team that's there and they're having tiebreakers against other teams, it won't be as big of an impact to them. Iowa State's in a tough spot because they're got the loss of Cincinnati. That tiebreaker is going to work against them. Arizona State plays Utah this week and then Texas Tech next week. Like, they could be out of this like that. And I like Arizona State. I don't love them this year. Like, I'm not confident in Arizona State getting back there. I do think they're figuring a lot of things out, and I do think it's a good team. I just think it's going to be hard for them to go 2-0 in the next 2 weeks. And if they go 0-2, like, it's done. Whereas last year we were down to the last week and having to use tiebreakers to figure out which of the 4 tied teams for second place got in there. It might happen this year. I don't know that it will, just based off the way the schedule stacks up and how many of the teams play each other. I think it's going to be Texas Tech, and then it's going to be a matter of, like, do you have one of those other contenders? You have who goes 2-0 against the other contenders?
Right. Who beats who?
Cincinnati has a leg up with the win over Iowa State. They do play Utah and Arizona State in the season. You can afford one loss. It just puts a lot of pressure on Iowa State. Utah doesn't have as much pressure as we think. Arizona State's got a tough 2 weeks. I think it's those 4 teams versus Texas Tech. I don't buy BYU. And I have a hard time, and unless I really go look at everyone else's schedules and really dive in, I don't trust TCU's offensive line or lack of run game. I like Houston. I like their defense a lot. I don't trust the offense enough to get enough wins. Like I said, I don't really trust BYU against better competition. Who am I leaving out here that's an actual potential contender? Like Baylor? I'm not trusting that Baylor defense.
No.
No. So I don't know who else to take seriously in this conversation for contenders. I think it's a 5-team. I think it's Texas Tech and a 4-team race.
I think that's fair. I don't necessarily disagree with that at all. So we are going to end with one more question about Saturday's game. If you believe it's possible, make the case for how the Cowboys make this a much closer game than the odds makers seem to expect, and even perhaps win this football game.
Wegman doesn't play. Zion, Warrior Princess Chris is bad. And Oklahoma State wins a, 13-10 awful, terrible, why did we put this on TV kind of football game.
All right.
Like that,
if it gets, I totally get that.
If it gets just ugly,
you got to make it ugly. You got to make it ugly.
Your Oklahoma State's backup quarterback comes in and just has some big wild plays, and OSU breaks off a few things, and 2 quarterbacks are throwing interceptions, and there's turnovers, and somehow OSU just being at home does enough to get a really gnarly win. That's to me the blueprint for that happening. Otherwise, like if and I'll let you guys tell me. Like I would be shocked if Wegman played, if he's going through concussion protocol to be playing 1 week later. Typically you see most concussions sit out longer than a full week. So I'm going to guess that Zion, Warrior Princess Chris, or is it, what was the Disney movie that was like was it Zenon? Oh, what was the chicken space? I don't remember. Sorry. Going way back to youth.
I think Connor's going to play this weekend.
Okay.
Everything kind of looks like it. You're not wrong about the concussion protocol. I also think he was getting pretty beat up in that game a little bit here. And I mean, you probably saw PFF ranked the most percentage of dropbacks that anyone had was U of H number 1 and Texas was number 2, and we were 15 points ahead of them. 70% of our dropbacks, something crazy like that, were under pressure. I think it was kind of getting beat up, and I don't want to say that I'm not trying to imply that the white flag was necessarily raised, but at some point you gotta kind of live to see the other day. Maybe a backup quarterback comes in, you get the spark. If you saw the play in which he got the concussion, maybe it didn't seem like a crazy insane hit, and those are some of the concussions that get you. I think that he's in protocol, but I think he'll be ready to go on Saturday, and I think Fritz has even indicated that a little bit.
Okay, Alan, Houston with a W.
So we will see there. Well, Phillip, thank you so much for your time. We love partnering with you. Thanks for talking a little bit of Cowboy football with us.
Always a pleasure. Happy to hop on anytime. Thanks so much for everything you guys do. I thank the Lord every day I've got the best Houston podcast on the network.
Hey.
Understating it a little bit, but this has not been the easiest start for Oklahoma State. That is why one of the longest tenured head coaches in all of college football, Mike Gundy, who we talked about with Phillip, is no longer here. But if you look at this OSU football team, it's really easy to see why Gundy is no longer here. Yes, we're still talking about the best coach in Oklahoma State's football history, but everything about that feels like it was a parting of ways that should have happened last season. Not that OSU doesn't have the potential to beat U of H, though I don't think it's an especially high potential. You could hear that in the way our guest talked about his alma mater and team this season. When I looked at them, Bobby, they felt very much like a thrown together without much forethought roster. And that's not a description that I would imagine any OSU fans would really disagree with. And nothing embodies that more than the quarterback position. They brought in Haas Haney, a one-time elite recruit, but he suffered a pretty serious injury in week 1 that it's at least somewhat doubtful he's back for 2025. Certainly a few weeks from now is the earliest projected return date for him in this season. Backup Zane Flores, quite frankly, doesn't look like a Big 12 caliber quarterback, and now he's out injured and might not be back at all. Against Arizona, OSU tried super senior Sam Jackson V, who previously in his college career played at quarterback, but hasn't much in the past couple seasons and is now getting reps there. Banks Bowen, the true freshman, has played. So your options are either a guy who's only played a little quarterback over his college career and hasn't the last couple seasons, or a true freshman who signed with Tulsa but ended up playing at OSU because his dad is on the staff now. Far from their only problem. If I had to diagnose, OSU's defensive problems are probably more serious than the offensive ones, but that struggle at quarterback is kind of emblematic of their struggles in the current season. Bobby, what have you learned that you would like to share about this week's opponent?
Yeah, man. It do be ugly when you are looking at the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Also, I was using OSU a lot for Oregon State, and we have Oklahoma State, so my brain like just keeps going back to Oregon State when I write down OSU in my notes. Also, we play 2 OSUs, both bright orange schools, just kind of fun.
Less fun, both might be having their worst season this century.
Yeah, not fun for them. Perfectly fine for us. No, as I was going through, I was trying to find something that they do well. Buddy, it's a struggle. They don't do anything well. I want your opinion on this. Are they the worst P4 team in America? Like maybe you go Cal, but Cal or UCLA,
because the fact that they lost to Tulsa, like Tulsa is very much like at the beginning of a rebuild. It's not like there have been Tulsa teams. Like I hate to compliment this program, but like between us, there's been some Tulsa teams this century that's not ashamed to lose to. Like Tulsa's had some good football teams this century.
Oh yeah. This is
not one of those teams, and they beat you at home and like probably beat you by worse than the final margin would indicate. So no,
they dominated.
I'll think about it for a few more minutes, and I will cut in an appropriate time if I think of one. But I really don't think so for sure.
Okay, so the one that kind of came to my mind, North Carolina. North Carolina's pretty bad.
Ooh, okay.
But Sam, I'm going to now prove my point. They are 117th in SP+. Not good. Not good. The next closest P4 program is North Carolina at 102. The next closest Big 12 program is West Virginia at 82. Sam, they're 35 spots behind the next worst Big 12 team.
That's surprising, but also not at all surprising, if that makes sense. You're just wow, that's really crazy. But then you think about how bad they've been, like, yeah, no, that tracks.
The offense is 111th. West Virginia is 87. That's 24 spots offensively behind a West Virginia team that has not looked good. If you think that's bad, somehow that defense is worse. If it wasn't for them having the 35th special teams, they might be lower than 117th. They are so bad, Sam. They are so bad. they're just not good. That being said, I did kind of say the same about Oregon State, and we saw how that game went. Somehow the Cowboys are worse than Oregon State, though. Like, they don't do anything well. We have very little idea who's going to be their quarterback. That could be a problem because you don't have a lot of tape on them, I guess. But God, I really hope that it's not a problem, Sam. There's very few guys that you just kind of point to and go, oh yeah, this guy could play on other P4 rosters. You go through the list and you're just like, maybe. And it would have to be like their best players are like rotation guys in other P4 schools.
Yeah, Oregon State at least had Malik Murphy. And I don't want to oversell what Malik Murphy is, but Malik Murphy versus OSU's third or fourth string quarterback, like that's an entirely different thing. Like and the other OSU, I think the worst performance in that one to me was the Cougar offense not being able to do anything against the OSU defense. Like I don't think that was a great Cougar defensive performance, but like you also got them off the field a lot in that one. That was more a product of just like your offense spending a good chunk of that game just not doing anything. I have a hard time, at the risk of jinxing it, I have a really hard time seeing this OSU emulating what the previous OSU did, which is not super explosive, but efficient running game and being able to do stuff in the passing game when asked. I just, every FBS opponent who has faced OSU this year until Arizona on Saturday has rushed for at least 200 yards against the Pokes. And Arizona did so much in the passing game against OSU that it was kind of irrelevant that they couldn't run the football. There's probably some of that also is just like runs between the line very late, just trying not to score anymore against this opponent. And they had a bunch of sacks this past week against Arizona, but again, that feels more like an anomaly than anything because, as I kind of alluded to, U of A shredded OSU for way over 400 yards passing, and that game was never close. The Pokes only had one quarterback sack total against Oregon, Tulsa, and Baylor. And I realize Oregon and Baylor are both varying degrees of good offense, but that you didn't do better than that against Tulsa, who is, I must emphasize, with a first-year head coach, they're very much at the beginning of their own rebuild, probably the 11th or 12th best team in the American right now. Not a good team right now, and you couldn't get pressure against them. I'm not saying it's a get-right game for the Cougar offensive line because I will believe this offensive line keeps a U of H quarterback clean for most of it at the exact moment I see it, at least against an FBS opponent. But this is an ideal spot as compared to what you were doing last week, which is facing the most fearsome defensive line that money could buy. That is not what you'll be seeing this week in Stillwater. And they don't play the games on paper, but this would seem to be a game that as a U of H fan, you should expect to be a get-right team for this game. I know we've had 8 quarters in a row of mostly pretty poor play by your offense, going back to the Oregon State game, where in that one, really your offense only played well for some of the second and fourth quarters. And this game cannot be a third straight week, and go back further, 5th time in 6 games where your offense gets out to a noticeably slow start if this isn't going to be a stressful affair. Again, the good news is I don't see this OSU offense coming off under 200 yards of offense against a fine but not great Arizona team last Saturday doing enough to win this football game. That's where it breaks down for me. This is not me dismissing the mere possibility that Oklahoma State, back playing in front of their home crowd and humbled after that loss to Arizona, can't play better this week against the Cougs. But if U of H can't find a way to win on Saturday, that's a massive failure. That is the kind of loss that calls into question whether this team can achieve its larger goals over the rest of the season. I'm not even saying win with style points, even though I think this is a bad enough opponent that maybe you should, but you need to find a way to win this game, pretty or not. Like this, you can't use the excuses of traveling. You can't use the excuse of anything lingering from the Tech loss. Win this football game or watch people very quickly jump off the bandwagon. I don't want to be too negative, but this is the game you have to win to achieve your goals this season. Tech was not one of those games. This is one of those games.
Absolutely. You have to absolutely win this game. And you said pretty or not. I want it to be pretty.
I do too, to be clear.
We haven't seen many pretty games, and if you're going to have a pretty game, if you are going to have a pretty game, this needs to be the pretty game that you do have.
No doubt. Any other OSU thoughts, Bobby, before we move on?
No, sir.
So before we leave the topic of football entirely, we will take a quick look at how Bobby and I did picking in the past week. And it feels like you and I are both never going to have a good weekend at the same time. I went 2-1 on the heels of going winless the previous week. You and Ofer after going 2-1 the previous week. My successful picks were Texas Tech under 363.5 pass yards and TCU minus 13.5 against Colorado. And I also unsuccessfully took the U of H Tech over of 50.5 points. The game total on that one finished at 46. Bobby, you had the Cougs plus 10.5. Sadly, didn't come close to happening. Tech's under of 175.5 on rush yards, and Iowa State plus 1.5. This puts me back in the lead, though, by a very small margin, 120 to 110 for the season as we record tonight. So still only one season to win here, Bobby. What are your bounce back picks for the coming week?
All right, so I am going to take the under in the U of H game of 46.5. Actually, me and Phillip were speaking after the interview. We just kind of talked for another 5 or 10 minutes just about Big 12, that kind of stuff. This really feels like a game where U of H may cover and still hit the under. Like, it just kind of feels that way. So I'm going to take the under of 46.5. Then on our player props or team props, I'm going to take Houston over 162.5 yards rushing. It just feels like something we're going to jump out to a lead, and then Dean Connors is just going to have a Dean Connors-like game where he averages 4.5 a carry, and they feed everybody, 50 times. It just kind of has that feeling that hopefully the Cougs jump out to a lead and kind of go from there. And then for my Big 12 game, I'm going to take TCU minus 1.5 points against, I don't know why I didn't write that part down, but I will take TCU minus 1.5, Sam.
I was trying to remember who they were playing too, because I feel like I gave that one consideration, though I did not pick it. My first pick is probably the longest I've spent thinking about any pick I've made this season. Don't know why, but just took a while to think on that one. I took the Cougs minus 14.5 points, even off of two performances that should not fill any U of H fan with confidence. I do believe this U of H team is fundamentally better than OSU, and unlike some previous seasons, capable enough, just barely, of scoring the points on the road to get from point A to point B on that one. I'd be lying if I didn't say I would have been more comfortable if that number was 13.5 or a smaller number, because I could totally see OSU cutting it to a 2-touchdown final margin in garbage time. But I'm taking the Cougs in the points here. For my team prop pick, Bobby, we finally did it. We finally organically picked the same thing, because I also had the Cougar offense with over 162.5 rush yards, even off of 2 weeks where varying degrees you struggled to run the ball. I believe U of H could do it this game, and I believe this will be the kind of game like you described where we'll have the lead such that you'll be going very run first. So I'm buying the dip on the recent Cougar rush offense struggles and picking the Cougs to have a bounce back performance, running the ball in Stillwater on Saturday. And for my final non-U of H, my Big 12 game pick of the week, I am taking Texas Tech minus 13.5 at home. Against Kansas, I do believe the Jayhawks are a better team than U of H in specific ways, and that will challenge the Red Raiders more than our beloved Cougars did. But I have a hard time seeing the Jayhawks, especially on defense, doing enough to cover that number, being able to stay within 2 touchdowns of Texas Tech. I kind of pictured this as a 35-17 kind of Tech win, and frankly, given what that team has done to its first 2 Big 12 opponents, to me it's a safe play if you want to pick winners in a pick'em contest like we're doing here, to go with the Red Raiders until the results stop going their way or the lines get too laughably large to consider. Not to say I'm just going to 100% pick Tech here going forward, but hate to say it, they do look like head and shoulders better than the rest of the Big 12 in the sport right now.
Yeah, hard to disagree with you there. Just FYI, TCU plays K-State.
I was going to say thank you. Thank you for ending this on literally anything but me saying something nice about Texas Tech.
Also, another one that caught my eye, BYU minus 1.5 at Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of don't know what Arizona is, but
yeah,
I mean, I don't know, a few things go differently. Like they're not that far from Colorado scaring them a lot more than they did. And I think Arizona is at least slightly better than Colorado. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And as we alluded to at the start of the pod, unfortunately, a challenging week for Cougar sports outside of just a certain Saturday night football game. We're going to talk Cougar soccer here. Not entirely a week of negatives. You knew going into last week that the 2 home games that U of H had were big opportunities. BYU came to Houston as the highest ranked opponent we've seen this season. Utah looked on paper very much like a match you could have won, and by doing so, put yourself on the right side of the fight to be a Big 12 postseason team and in the top 8 of the conference standings. This isn't to say that, again, everything went wrong this week. Cougs with 2 O's got a result on Thursday night against a BYU team that's still by far the best one you've seen at home this year, but Utah ended up being a frustrating loss, and a win in either of these would have been valuable, and unfortunately, you were not able to get in either case. Bobby, what were your key takeaways from the past week of Cougar soccer?
Yeah, man, a week of positives and negatives. Last week, you and I discussed this really good BYU team and how we wanted to see what you could do with the talent gap, and the Cougs got the draw, like you said. That's an absolutely unfathomable result a year ago against top-notch competition. I would have never thought that if we were playing some of the best teams in the country, a team that beat the number 4 team in the country, that we would have gotten a draw with them. Maybe a 0-0, but a 1-goal draw, it really speaks a lot to where this program has already gone, that we are like, oh man, would have been nice to get a result there. It just says a lot there. The next game, though, was the reminder that you still have a decent way to go with a 1-0 loss, like you said, to the Utes. By just about every stat, though, the Cougs won. They had more shots, they had more corners, more cards. So you kind of like what you see there. You just want to see them finish. Utah got that early lead. I think they scored in the 15th minute, if I recall correctly. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of soccer sometimes. This team can score and you're trying to counter. If you look at the action in that game, if you go to the play-by-play, there's a lot of U of H things going on there. U of H kept up the pressure, and that's just not really something we saw a lot last year in watching these games and going through the stats and things like that. So, yeah, a lot of good, a lot of bad. But overall, kind of hard to be too upset when you remember where this team was just 12 months ago.
And it's not lost on me that when you saw BYU last year, they comfortably beat you 3-0 in Provo, and that Thursday night was night and day more competitive for U of H. Also hurt losing starting keeper Lexi Gonzalez in the 22nd minute against BYU to injury. Even when you have an experienced backup like Maggie Manning, I mean, it's a good comp to losing your starting quarterback in a football game. You're bringing in a player cold at maybe the most critical position, and that's no knock on the player coming in. It's just more challenging than at any other position group in soccer where you're going to at least do some rotating in and out of players over the 90 minutes, whereas your starting goalie is going to play the full 90 if healthy, basically 100% of the time, unless it's just an insane blowout. U of H was the first team on the board in that one. Casey Max got her 3rd of the season, got the ball in a dangerous spot just inside the box, made a little move, and then slotted it past BYU's goalkeeper to the bottom right. Unfortunately, BYU got the equalizer right before halftime too. Always painful when that happens, off a corner kick where it kept bouncing right in front of the goal, and U of H couldn't clear it out of there. And from watching it live and even rewatching the clip a few times, to me it looked like a U of H own goal, but official credit goes to a BYU player. Neither team scored in the second half. BYU had more chances and more possession, which isn't to say that U of H did nothing. Just from the game action, it was more BYU chasing the win and the 3 points than U of H was. It like you said, speaks to the higher standards we have for this team in 2025, because getting a tie against a top 30 RPI team like BYU last year would have been one of the results of the season. It was the result of the season 2 years ago when you did it randomly against TCU in your first Big 12 season, but not something done with any regularity the past few seasons. Not as much nice to say about the Sunday match, a very frustrating one. Like you brought up, Cougs really dominated the possession categories, the shots, the corners, like definitely the team that had more of the ball. Really got off to a good start in this one. Then BYU kind of started getting into the game. Utah's Bella Woods was able to dispossess one of our players in the middle of the field and then hit a shot from distance that went in, a very high degree of difficulty goal. I would say the best one that's been scored against U of H this entire season. it did look like your keeper was caught a little off her line and didn't expect Woods to try from distance, but I mean, entirely possible given where she put it that shot doesn't get saved regardless, and that I'm in error even assigning a little blame to the keeper there. And it was kind of the nightmare scenario we worried about U of H facing from there. Not that Utah didn't attack at all, but for most of the remaining 75 minutes, U of H had the ball. U of H was attacking the Utes and just couldn't break this opponent down. And so Utah was able to leave Houston with their first Big 12 win of the season. Speaks to how much better this team has looked that we actually find a 1-goal Big 12 loss disappointing instead of just, I mean, frankly, last year, a one-goal Big 12 loss would have been one of the most competitive results we had in conference play all season. We pretty much lost almost all those by multiple goals without it really ever being competitive. It's entirely different expectations. It's the curse of actually looking pretty decent sometimes. Up next, the Cougs will play only once in the. I'm sorry, did you have anything else on that?
No. All I was gonna say was, yeah, man. That was the thing that stood out to me as I'm going through this week. I was looking at it, and I was actually looking at soccer and not just hanging my head. I was looking at it, going, okay, no, that's a really good result. You got that 1-1 draw. Like you just didn't see that last year.
We'll point out also, speaking of like previous draws, literally the only time Tech hasn't won in conference play this season was the draw we got, the almost win we got in Lubbock. Like this is a team capable of playing up to the moment, and they're going to need to do so as a neat segue, because your one game this week is going to be a very challenging one. You're traveling to West Virginia to take on a WVU team that has not lost at home since their season opener against a top 25 Virginia team. More recently, the Mountaineers decisively beat the two Arizona Big 12 programs, who are generally good to respectable teams, last weekend, kept a clean sheet in both. For the entire season, the Mountaineers' only 2 losses were against top 25 programs. They're a very challenging team any way you slice it. But again, what I mentioned a moment ago, we saw U of H go to Texas Tech and push an even better Lady Raider team to the absolute brink in that one before they rescued a tie. So that's the upshot. Even off of a week where not everything went right for the Cougs, we could still look ahead to a tough Big 12 opponent and not just think to ourselves, all right, they're going to name their score against us, and I'm going to try to get to the other topic here as quickly as possible. Like, I think if you did kind of a favorite underdog thing here, of course, West Virginia at home's the favorite here, but I can't, the last team that I had any belief could possibly compete against this level of opponent was the fall of 2021. So still a program worth being positive about, even acknowledging the challenge of the one on-field opportunity you have this week.
Yeah, just kind of looking here. Sam, I don't know if you looked at this. Do you know what West Virginia's goals against per game is? What like goals allowed per game is?
Was it decently high?
No.
I thought I remember them scoring a lot of, I don't know why. Maybe I'm
no goals against.
Like again, no, I know. I think I was mixing them and BYU up because BYU actually like conceded a decent amount. I'm gonna say 0.4.
0.58.
That's
and
crazy.
If you go back and you look at just Big 12, they've given up 3 goals in 5 games.
Not great.
Not great for the Cougs. Great for West Virginia. Kind of interesting to watch. Like you see their games and you're like, oh, they must score a good amount or anything like that. No, man. You don't score on West Virginia, man. So if the Cougs walk away with a goal, that's kind of exciting. Like you're doing better than a lot of teams have.
I like that you've already had a couple of very difficult road opponents in the fall season already. Texas Tech, obviously the challenges of them being one of the better programs out there, period. And then Colorado, who also looks like one of the better programs out there this season, and you're playing them at elevation. So won't be the first long trip you've made this season, won't be the first long trip you've made to play a good opponent, but obviously can't come on here and not acknowledge the challenges that this opponent presents.
Yeah, gonna not be fun, for sure.
Hey, it could be not fun for them, though.
Hey,
we actually have the hope this year. It could be not fun for them.
That's it, buddy. I like where your brain's at.
Switching over quickly to Cougar Volleyball, a program we knew would going to have their own very tough week, going on the road to 2 RPI top 25 opponents. You competed at Baylor and Colorado in that order over the last week. The expectations were modest from us, but other than one set against Baylor, you didn't really give either of these opponents any heartburn. They were both 3-0 losses. And once again, like you did against TCU previously, you had Baylor at set point once. You had him at set point at 24-23 in the second set, but Baylor won 3 of the final 4 points and took that set and never really looked back from there. The Colorado match on Saturday was just plainly not competitive. It is the least competitive you've been in any match this season in any of the 3 sets. To varying degrees, all 3 of those sets were Colorado getting out to an early lead, keeping that cushion, then gradually building on it until they reached 25 points and took the set and eventually took the match. Not a fun weekend, but I guess my question to you, my opportunity to throw it to you to talk about Cougar volleyball is, do you just flush that week because, kind of like tech and football, you never really believed Baylor or Colorado were the opponents that you expected U of H to beat away from home, or does the fact that you didn't even really compete in either of those matches for the most part really give you any kind of concern?
I think the thing that gives me concern is that you did not just compete in the matches. Like if you lose 3-0, like you get swept against a good team, that's kind of expected, or not expected, but like you can live with that. I think the problem is you got your ass kicked, right? Like you lose 25-16, 27-25. You're right, you had a set point there, but then you go down 25-17. That's 2 non-competitive sets in that Baylor game. Then Colorado, the closest you got was 25-20. You'd really like to see it 25-23, at 26-24, somewhere in there. I know these are good teams. You'd like to see it just be a little bit more competitive, not to harp too much on it. But yeah, I think the only thing that is a cause for concern for me is how uncompetitive you looked.
Yeah, because like you go back 2 seasons to a top 25 Cougar volleyball team, and that team didn't beat Baylor in Waco either, but that team also probably competed a bit more than this one. Well, we'll also say not that
match.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you were, because that was like it was the last regular season home match, if memory serves, that season, right?
That was their away match at Baylor.
That's why Baylor. It was the last regular season.
Yeah.
It was around Thanksgiving, something around then.
Yep, it was like the day before or the day after,
that's right.
Something like that. Yep.
Nice to see Bree Reed back out there. Not an easy stretch for her, obviously, just because of the level of opponent, but nice to see her back after an injury layoff at the start of Big 12 play. Up next, the Cougars will continue the road portion of the schedule. We'll play at Utah on Thursday evening and then BYU on Saturday afternoon. The first match against Utah is certainly the more winnable of the 2. Unlike the Cougs, Utah has actually not won a match in Big 12 play, at least as of recording tonight here on Tuesday, but also not a pushover opponent. Utah has very close 5-set losses to Iowa State and Arizona teams that are pretty good from their recent slate. They beat a top 25 Dayton team at home early in the season. They're more beatable than Baylor or Colorado were, but you're still going to need a better effort than you've had in a while to get this road Big 12 win. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think you're going to need to show more than you have on the road at Utah. It is a match that you can win, and I think this is going to be a good measuring stick for the Cougs.
No doubt. Not so much on Saturday. You'll be competing at BYU, much more challenging. The Cougs with a U are a top 25 opponent and have only lost twice this entire season. Another 2 years ago memory, Bobby, was both ours and BYU's first season in the league, and kind of being excited to see how a top 25 Houston team competed in Provo, and unfortunately you just didn't. You lost that 1-3-0, and if anything, I think you're getting them at a bad time off of kind of a shock 3-2 upset loss on the road at West Virginia. I mean, there's no good time to face this team, but probably not going to get them anything but their most focused right now. I've got to see, this U of H team compete with that level of opponent before I believe anything like that, will happen on Saturday, which is no shot at this U of H team. It just hasn't happened yet this season. So I feel like you're putting a lot of your judgment on the week to come on what you do against Utah on Thursday night.
Yeah. Just a fun little side note. One of my favorite things is to watch sporting events at BYU because the amount of MLMs that they have advertised in their stadium is hilarious, right? Like I saw them a couple of times and I was like, what is that? And I looked it up and it's definitely a multi-level marketing. And let's just say people who attend BYU are certainly into those kind of things. And so it never fails to make me laugh. Just the sheer amount of multi-level marketing that occurs at BYU's basketball stadium.
Huh.
Or just
Mormon's big into MLMs. Who'd have thunk it? Bobby, we're very deep in this episode, but gotta talk about the, I believe, third win in as many fall events, and we're gonna talk about that in a little place we like to call Cougar Golf Corner.
Right, we had the Cougs playing in Dallas, up here in Dallas. They played at Trinity Forest Golf Club, which is, Sam and I were actually talking about this. He was like, have you ever played out there? And I was like, no, I'm a poor. This podcasting thing does not pay enough for me to, as a side hustle, to be at Trinity Forest. But anyways, Cougs got to play out at a very nice course, former PGA Tour stop. And team event wise, you looked okay. You finished 5th. You played against some Big 12 competition. You beat Baylor in this. You played against SMU's A and B team. You beat their B team pretty handily. But the exciting news here is you do have the individual champion with Hudson Weibel going 15 under. He won in a playoff. Second playoff hole, he nails a 40-footer for birdie. Those greens at Trinity Forest are not easy. To nail a 40-footer is absolutely impressive. So you got to give it up to him there for a win. We like talking about wins. The problem became the team result. Like I said, 5th place, you had Hudson going 15 under, and then everyone else just kind of finished mid-pack. You had Chun Chin. Sorry, I normally don't stumble over that. Chun Chin comes in at 3 under. He finishes 24th. Kevin On finishes in 25th at 2 under. Then you had Grant Doggett, who had a really good final day, but he finished 3 over on the tournament. You also had Huashan Yi Chin. I'm going to get better at that. I could not find pronunciation on that. And I will reach out.
Your buds with Disney. Give him a shout. Be like,
yeah.
I'm doing my best.
I'm doing my best here, man.
Help on this.
And then you have Jack Altic. I'm assuming it's Jack, Jayk. That is certainly
Jake? I think that's Jake.
Jake, yeah, Jake. Jake. I don't know. Very.
It's an unconventional Jake. Very unconventional Jake.
Yeah, very Gen Z. Coded in that one, but he finished 9 over. But he was competing as an individual. So, a lot of good results for Hudson Weibel so far. Should get you pretty excited for the spring season.
Yeah, this was a good field too. Like not like an insane elite, like unbeatable field, but this is a good field. Like this isn't one of those like, okay, like U of H won the event, but like a U of H player probably should have been the best event. I mean, listed off, there are a lot of really good programs in this event, and Hudson Weibel was the best among all of them there, which is really cool. And for the second time in one fall season, which seems like a lot. Like he was definitely one of the returners we figured would be a key contributor. But I think two championships in a single not completed yet fall season, I think is a reason to be very excited.
Yes, sir.
And before we go, this is not going to be a full Cougar Tennis Corner because there are no new results to talk about, but we'll quickly mention that Houston Cougar Tennis will be back in action Thursday through the early part of next week, potentially at the ITA Texas Regionals in Fort Worth, one of those fall events with stakes beyond just fall development and any of the things that come with that. The athletes who do well at this event will have a chance to participate in the further ITA events this fall, possibly advancing to the NCAA Fall Individual Championships as well. I think more than anything, just a chance for Cougar athletes to go head-to-head with players from all the other D1 Texas programs. So we'll actually go in depth on what happened at the event next episode, but I thought it was worth at least mentioning here before we go at the end of another very long but very enjoyable podcast to you. Bobby, take it home, friend.
All right, well, we will see once editing happens. We're probably at about an hour 45 of great Cougar content. I believe it's great Cougar content, even if you don't.
If you've made it this far, you probably believe it's great or close to it.
Yeah, exactly.
At least a solid good.
If you have any feedback for us or you want to talk to us, you can find us on social media. We are at SH Podcast, PAWDCAST on Twitter. You can also find us on Blue Sky at podcast, PAWDCAST, podcast.bsky.social. And if you have sworn off social media for the year, you're almost there. You might as well stay with it at this point. You can email us at shpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you there. And if you really want us to pay attention to your feedback, trust me, you jump to the top. If you go to our Patreon for $5 a month, all you got to do is pay $5 a month and you get our post-game coverage and any other premium content that we do. $5 a month gets you that at patreon.com/shpodcast. Sam, I think I covered it all. What do we always say?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Coogs! Let's go!